So, welcome to another one of our Digital Marketing Answered. Thank you very much for joining us. Please do, if you like this episode, leave a review. It helps other people discover us, whatever of your platform of choice is. But today we're going to be talking about how AI is empowering patients in healthcare. And I'm very, very happy to be joined by Warris Bokhari, who is co-founder and CEO of Claimable. Now, Warris has got extensive experience in working in the intersection of healthcare and technology. He began his career as a doctor in the UK, and he's got a passion for improving healthcare access. His journey's led to him working on a variety of different projects, including founding a number of different enterprises, as well as working with some of the biggest names that we know in both industry and also technology. But throughout his career, he's worked alongside a courageous team and investors that want to be committed to radical change. And we're excited to have him on here today talking about how Claimable is using AI, but also the wider use of AI in healthcare and its marketing. So, Warris, welcome to Digital Marketing Answered.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super happy to be here. Yeah, I mean, all of that sounds, impressive and intentional, but like I guarantee you, it's been like a series of like happy accidents through my career that's taken me from one place to another, and the passion to like try and help patients, I think, and just regular people very much stems from how I grew up in England, and maybe that's like an interesting
Yeah,
place to
it's a good
start. Is
starting
like,
point.
look, I mean, I grew up in probably not too far from where you are now, but in Croydon, like in Surrey, like and both my parents were disabled from as long as I can remember. My dad wasn't working. My mom was pretty sick. And I was also sick as a kid as well. Like, I mean, one of my earliest memories is being like rushed to hospital in Croydon because I was like near to, nearly stopping breathing because of my asthma. And I remember, doctors. I remember being scared as a kid. I remember how worried my parents were. The thing I don't remember is bills. And that is like complete. If you fast forward like, 40 years to like where I am now, if that happened to most Americans where I live now, like I live, 5,000 miles away from where I grew up, but like the risk of like going bankrupt or being afraid to seek healthcare services or any of those things is such a big problem that it is causing ill health. It's causing financial ill health. It's causing mental health problems. And it's meaning like an actual decrease in life expectancy in this country, which is like really problematic. In England, like I think at the last like every election I can remember effectively has been around protecting the NHS, and it's been like a bit of a political pawn. Yeah, every single government has somehow weirdly made it slightly worse. I don't quite understand how that's been the case. My warning to people is that Optum, or United Health, said by another name, is present in England. They've been there for a while, advising like every government on how to make healthcare just a little bit more privatized. And there's this concerted effort to try and break the will of the people into accepting any other model of healthcare in England than the NHS. And you speak to people privately, and they're like, "Well, they should just get rid of GPs. Well, they should just get rid of, get rid of the NHS and just have a different system because people would be paid more, and you get what you pay for." The answer, I'm on the other end of that coin. The answer is no, you don't. If you allow that to change and you allow that to break, the answer is no, you don't. Doctors here describe something called moral injury, and that's like it's a really weird term. And I was in Texas on the weekend, and I met with this doctor who just looked exhausted. And we were talking, and people are always a little bit cynical about like a doc who stopped practicing and started a company, and for good reason. But we got to it, and he was just like, I am exhausted by the idea of like fighting insurers every day, for getting my patients on medicines that I know they need to be on, and these patients go for months and months and months without. So I mean that's kind of like the synthesis of like, you know, all of the things, my upbringing up until now. I mean, we can dig into specific areas, but my answer is like, don't reject the NHS, ask questions, protect it, be very cynical of people like McKinsey and Optum who are like currently figuring out how to like monetize different aspects of it. It's not for good intent.
Yeah. I mean, I've been either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on which way you look at it, of being a hospital governor for 3 years as a publicly elected governor, and I have to say it makes you quite cynical about the management layer above the clinical layer in terms of what's going on and how it's running. But I suppose for the topic of this this podcast, I mean, that's a really interesting journey, and that's a very personal and powerful starting point that you describe about being ill and coming from a family where good health wasn't something that could be just assumed. And is that what made you study medicine and go into the NHS originally?
It's kind of curious. It's like in a roundabout kind of way. Sure. I think I rebelled against it for a long time, and I was always like very scientifically curious, and, you know, went to university and studied chemistry, and, you know, kind of thought that maybe I'd go down the more pharma kind of, you know, drug discovery route. Turns out I'm really bad in a lab. And so then I ended up like doing something that involved a lot less precision, which was going to medical school. But I'm being flippant. But in reality, like the arc of my life was like very much in that direction. And, you know, there was this kind of, I think I wanted to challenge myself to maybe be more present than some of the doctors that I saw caring for my mother, particularly when she was in like the last days of her life. I really wanted to challenge myself to just be present with families and do a good job. And, you know, could I make better decisions under that set of circumstances? And the answer was maybe yes, like when I run the experiment forward, but like, did it make a difference in the scheme of things? No, because there were still so many scientific hurdles that like, you know, even when someone gets to the intensive care unit, like you're really like, there's a limited number of things that you have in the tool set when someone's super sick that you can make a difference. And then the question is, why do doctors leave medicine? And it's because we all get deluded in the way of like, we believe that we can have scale, you know, we can help people at a greater scale than maybe we're afforded to in medicine. And a lot of my colleagues and friends have, you know, left clinical practice for that reason, and all gone on this journey of like, how do I help more people faster? And that takes people in different directions. And that certainly was like my reason to leave, was that I wanted to like bring about things. I'm impatient. So bringing about things that, you know, within my lifetime would be useful seems like a good bet. And that's very much where, you know, that's very much where I indexed. So anyway, to answer your question, like, maybe.
But you it's interesting you talk about being impatient, and I think a lot of founders and people with a founder mentality are quite impatient people. They want to be at the next stage now. They don't want to wait until tomorrow. But I like the way you describe it as wanting to help more people at scale. And is that why you went into organizations like Apple and GE? What was the draw there where you ended up in those kind of organizations?
I mean, it's interesting. So like GE, I was spending a lot of time in America at the time, and I was, you know, spending a lot of time in New York, and you're surrounded by all of these like buildings that were built by Carnegie and Vanderbilt and, you know, whoever, and you like kind of the Industrial Revolution, and you start like thinking about the origins of that and the companies that came out of it. And GE's like this giant American icon, right? It's like this, like and I'd spend a lot of time in the anesthetic room in my day job, and you know, the machines were GE machines, and I felt safe when patients were being anesthetized on GE machines. You know, the CT scanners were GE machines, and you can like, what's behind this? Wow, this company's in everything. And then, you know, I happened to like think I gate crashed a party in Orange County, which like, probably tells you a lot about me. But like, it was a CEO party for GE Healthcare, and like I got to meet the CEO of GE Health, and he offered me a job, and I was like, in a very British way, I'm like, I haven't earned this. And then I went home, I'm like, no, maybe I have earned this. I'm going to do this. So and so I ended up just kind of like talking my way into a role at GE, which was maybe the best opportunity I've had in my life of like really getting to like granularly understand corporate America, to understand why things happen, why things happen slowly and why some things happen quickly. I got to travel around the world effectively and visit different parts of GE's business, whether it was in Shanghai or in Sweden or South Korea or wherever. I got to like go there and understand it deeply and understand
Wow.
the problem set. We got to work on like frontier technologies like cell therapy, which is like revolutionizing the treatment of some cancers. And I got to see a lot of courage and leadership actually, from Kieran Murphy, who I owe a ton to. He's been like a career mentor to me, and even to John Flannery, who it was a tremendous CEO who got a very short shrift after Jeff Immelt got fired. John had just a ton of integrity. And he didn't last long there because of all of the shareholder activism. But that was my kind of experience at GE. It was like it was really like going from like 0 to 1,000 really quick. Apple was like super random. A friend of mine sent my resume to Johnny Ive, who I did not know. Like, I still do not know Johnny Ive. Johnny sent my resume to Tim Cook or someone, and then before I knew it, I was interviewing for a job at Apple. And I was like, well, this, at that point, like $100 billion company or multi-$100 billion company, like they're sitting so far outside of US healthcare that they could, if they wanted to, they could solve real problems by being a market force, in their own right, because they're not in the game. And we got to work on some really interesting things. I got to, be part of teams that worked on like some of the, great features on the watch. And there's a lot of like really innovative tools and kind of alerts that they develop. But my philosophical difference with Apple is that I care about healthcare, and Apple is like firmly indexed on promoting the health of as many people as possible, which is fine. It's aligned, but like the sense of urgency and lack of patience you see in me doesn't sit well with kind of focusing on a whole group of people who don't sit under the curve. And so and some of it is like, look, when you think about it, and when you break it down, I've thought about this for years after, marketing, care delivery solutions to a whole bunch of really sick patients just doesn't fit within the marketing ethos of a company that's heavily aspirational, and for good reason, like Apple. It fits more of a traditional healthcare company.
Apple's not looking to sell its watches to people who are sick, is it? It's saying, have this and stay healthy, because you're already successful, isn't it, in that mindset? But did Apple give you like a different view? Because there's plenty of technology in GE's machines and all of the things that they're doing, but Apple's a different type of technology. And how did that affect your thinking?
I mean, so it's interesting. There's a revolution kind of yet to happen with like some of this wearable data and getting like far enough ahead of an event to predict it. And some of the work that I did following Apple was very much focused on that, around predicting hospital admissions for asthmatics and getting ahead of it and trying to keep them out of hospital. Being an asthmatic, that's kind of important to me. And so I think that there are whole use cases that are like as yet not really well kind of instantiated in digital health, but they take a while to prove out. There's a lot of like incredible product work that happens at Apple in terms of experience design. There's a lot of like thought about like generalization of an experience and how this has to apply, like not just in one country, but it has to apply in every country where they sell a product. And you have to be thoughtful about culture and laws and inclusion. You have to think about skin types for sensors. Like there is a lot of really high quality thinking that happens in a place like that, which is, it's beyond the health team, it's in every team. Which is a good thing to be around, because then when you start taking some of the aspects of that and then applying it to healthcare in earnest, you can make real progress, especially if you're not then mired in like, oh well, I have to be this kind of company. I'm just thinking about, well, I need to solve solutions for this type of person,
Yeah.
solve problems even.
And was it your desire to go faster and start solving problems that started you getting involved with founding companies? Because it's quite a step from going from, pretty, I mean, I imagine it was a pretty comfortable roles at GE and Apple, let's say, and then going out and saying, right, okay, I'm gonna roll the dice and put it on the line. Was that what was driving you to do that, to actually really get out there and solve at pace?
I mean, more or less. I mean, again, it's this impatience thing. It's like, I'm in my mid-40s now, and it's gone by in a blink, right? So 10 years since I was last really living in England to any extent, and it's gone by so very quickly that there's a fundamental point at which you become like not useful in life in founding companies, and that might well be in my mid-60s. So there's a window of time where you have the energy to like really go at a new problem really aggressively. The other thing is, when you think about what promotes survival in big institutions, it's actually like really not changing very much at all. And that's not a slight on Apple, GE, or any other company. A lot of these companies are successful for a reason. They have gravity issues that like hold them to core behaviors, which means that like changing something very radically isn't something that any of these companies really want to do. And they might talk about wanting to do it. And I've been inside like any number of digital transformations inside of companies where leaders talk about like embracing modernity, embracing AI, embracing blockchain, embracing this, embracing that. But if it comes down to changing the core operations of a business, there's so much resistance to that ever being a thing that the activity becomes worth more than the output. And people survive in companies, people survive in big companies for perpetuating activities versus ever generating real output. So, and I can take that, and so to answer your question, if you're interested in outputs, then the only way you can do that is by trading off against all of the security of being inside of a big company and actually just indexing really heavily on finding people who care about solving that problem. And that's exactly what we've gone and done.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, it would be good to actually talk a bit about Claimable, because it's a very interesting product or service. I don't know how you describe it, but from both what you're doing, but also I think people listening would like to understand the how you do it as well. So could you sort of paint the picture of where it came from?
It's probably worth just talking a little bit about the problem that we're solving, which is like, okay, so in insurance, the billing unit is a claim, right? In all of the United States healthcare, across every type of population, there are about 5 billion claims that are filed per year. And the insurance system basically weeds out about a fifth of those. So 850 million claims every year get denied. And if you were to think about what that equates to, by my rough maths, that equates to about 90 million Americans. And the conversion is, if you think that each person sees a doctor 3 times a year, and there might be 3 claims associated with a visit, which is a lab visit, a clinic visit, and a pharmacy claim. So if 1/5 of those are getting denied, then you kind of start thinking it's around 85 to 90 million people. So then I got curious with to like, well, what's the natural history of these denials, and like how many of them ever get challenged? And the answer is like 99.9% of these denials never get appealed. And so then the question is like, what happens to the humans? Well, there was a Commonwealth report in September which showed that the US is ranking dead last in healthcare. It's last for access, it's last for cost. There are a lot of things that we're really not doing very well. So it's interesting. We're paying 16.5% of GDP, but yet none of the real outcomes that you would associate with something that's worth it exist. So then the question became like, well, why don't patients appeal because they have legal rights to appeal? The answer is like, one, they don't know that these rights exist, and they're on the ballot next week, by the way, and
Yeah.
which we maybe talk about, maybe not, but like they're on the ballot
Yeah.
next week. Effectively, whether people know it or not.
Well, we don't. This will probably go out after
Sure.
the ballot has happened, which will be a really interesting one. So you can put your prediction in, but it will
Well,
it will come to pass by the time this goes out for
I
our
sus
listeners.
I suspect so. So people don't appeal because they don't know. They don't know how. It's like arguing with the bank or a mortgage company. It's like, I don't know the words to use to tell you that I need this thing, but I really need it. And if I don't have it, bad things happen, which might
Yeah.
be the level of sophistication that most people in pain get to
Yeah.
in the moment. So what we did is like, we were like, well, look, these AI models are now like incredibly democratized, but no one's really using them for anything terribly useful that solves like a near-term problem. So
Yeah.
like, what if we created an AI for the people? Because it's now so cheap that you could do this,
Yeah.
and like solve some of the problems around AI, which would be like, okay, Chat GPT, if you use it just on its own, it's going to invent every single scientific citation, that it gives you,
Yeah.
that all just be
Yeah.
completely
Just make it up.
fabricated.
Yeah.
It's just going to make it up. Yeah, so people don't
Yeah.
know how to appeal. They also don't know
Yeah.
the words to use. So then we figured we'd flatten that knowledge asymmetry. And so by
Yeah.
pointing AI at an actual useful problem like this, which is like very near term, we're now suddenly able to connect people back with healthcare that they need. And
Yeah.
and again, if you have a UK audience, this would be kind of like an alien phenomenon, like an alien concept to
Yeah.
them. But like, the doctor and the patient aren't deciding ultimately who gets what. The doctors are actually mostly employed by the health insurers. And so if the health insurers have
Yeah.
a financial incentive to like make money,
Yeah.
that incentive is ultimately going to sway them to deny more care than's needed. So like, we're beating 85% of these denials since
Yeah.
launch, which is telling us that most of these denials are completely baseless, right? And so we're
Yeah.
finding that the insurers are using policies that are really old. They're providing they're using AI to provide like just bizarre rationales that like don't hold any clinical weight, and the patient wouldn't know,
That's
but
interesting.
we're able to strip all of that out.
So that's really interesting. So you're saying that the insurers are actually using AI now to deny the claims, and they're writing rebuttals, should we say, for those using AI. That's a scary use of AI, I would have thought.
Yeah, it is, and a lot of patients don't know why it's happening, and the doctors are getting exhausted by fighting against it, because obviously you can like issue like thousands of AI denials against patients in a month, right? Which
Yeah.
is what Cigna, one of the big insurers, was sued for that. There was just a big expose on United Health. Doing this for seniors in the Medicare Advantage plan,
Mm.
and patients don't really understand what's happening. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of like very pernicious uses of AI, and part of the reason is because it's actually just so much harder to transform the core of your business. So it's the only levers you're left with are really to control cost
Yeah.
or revenue. That's really it. They can't really they don't really have any way to get at cost. So then the only thing they can really do is like stop approving so many claims. So they're just
Right.
trying to gate the money going out the door. I mean, that's my interpretation. It may not all be
Yeah.
malicious, but it certainly can seem that way if you're a patient who's being ignored for a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So can you describe then basically the underlying how you're using, should we say, the beneficial AI, or how you've got it structured to help empower the patient in this scenario? Then how is it actually put together?
Yeah, so we to build this, it's not all AI. It's also a lot of design work. It's a lot of
Yeah.
intentional design work to spend time with
Yeah.
patients in communities. So we spent a lot of time in the middle of America, in Missouri. We spent time in working with patients in Wisconsin. We've been working with patients in North Carolina, Texas,
Yeah.
wherever, like where they are, to understand their particular set of circumstances. So then you can actually really start understanding what you need
Yeah.
the AI prompts to be able to do.
Yeah.
It kind of combines a lot of the knowledge that I've had and my team's had from like um, clinical medicine, health policy, broad understanding of laws that protect patients, scientific evidence, and the AI is combining all of that. We basically collate all of this data into a private data set which sits outside of a foundational model, which basically gives the AI no capacity to hallucinate. So
Right.
it's really intentionally designed, and then we
Yeah.
do a lot of testing to make sure that like it's really understanding the patient's story, and we ask in various domains. So we're asking patients about like, obviously physical health. We ask about mental health symptoms that have resulted of their disease being not treated, because some of these patients like literally go for over a year without care. We ask about financial health because patients oftentimes can't work. And so we classify, all sorts of interesting things that happen to them there. And like some patients, like, they lose the ability to work, they don't get promoted, they don't show up to work so much. And that kind of trickles down to like this level of like financial instability,
Yeah.
which is present in a lot of people who are paycheck to paycheck. So we group all of that together and we really capture all of this in the patient's own words. And then we try to understand also, what treatments have they tried, what's worked, what hasn't. And most people, if you design it well, they can answer the questions. And we found that
Yeah.
certainly to be the case. And the core concept here is like not infantilizing patients. And I've heard, I found this a lot when I was, previously working in Medicaid. I remember pitching a study to, I think it was to some state Medicaid agency. I can't remember who it was. And they said, don't do this. We're giving Medicaid patients Apple Watches for this asthma program. They said, don't do this. They'll sell the watches and use it for drugs. And that was like staggeringly cynical. And that's like that's not a perspective in which I approach kind of healthcare. I kind of approach it from a perspective of like, we should be trying to make things better for people. And if you provide tools for people, there's a good chance that they do good things with them and they try and help themselves. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we found in the study with the Apple Watches. We found that we kept nearly half of these patients out of hospital
Right.
because they became more aware of their own symptoms. And so
Yeah.
if you start creating tools for patients in the underserved populations, which are built for them, they
Yeah.
might use them. And
Yeah.
I've had like any number of patients who are on Obamacare plans who say like, I really want to improve my health, I really want access to this treatment, but the exchange plans which are privately run but
Yeah.
publicly funded
Yeah.
say no.
Yeah.
And it's kind of staggering.
That's really interesting what you're saying, but sort of bringing what you've said up to like a wider level for marketing and revenue leaders. What was really interesting is you were describing the use of AI and the importance of design. You're putting your knowledge in as a specialist in an area, and also your engagement with the end user, the customer, thinking about the customer journey. So if you were talking to somebody who was wanting to embrace more AI in the marketing revenue journey, how would you sort of make that across the whole sort of
Yeah.
how would you describe how to work with AI in an effective way?
So I think first of all, you have to understand it, right? I remember this like one occasion where like Jeff Immelt came back from some blockchain conference, and then everyone was running around like with chickens with their heads cut off looking for applications of
Yeah.
blockchain within whatever. And I don't think anyone's found any
Yeah.
even today. So I think you have to be clear-eyed on what AI is, and it's a tool set, it's not a product. So you have to the problem you're looking to solve and the hypothesis you're trying to prove matters most.
Yeah.
And whereas I think people look at AI as being this magical box,
Yeah.
and if you do that, you'll have no productivity, you'll have no revenue gain, you'll have no savings, and then you're going to go through this kind of winter of discontent for AI solutions where these big companies start abandoning it because they're like, well, the promise hasn't been realized.
Yeah.
And that's like not going to set anyone up for success. So like the way I think about it is be really targeted with your use of AI. Be
Right.
like think very carefully about the segment that you're looking at,
Yeah.
and the problem set. It's got to have like a clearly defined problem. If you start there, then everything else becomes rational. And if it is a clearly defined problem, then it's going to tie to a segment of users who are then easy to target, whether you're thinking about, digital marketing, B2B SaaS, or whatever it is, or whether it's, D2C or B2B. It starts becoming clearer who your phenotype of customer is.
Yeah. And I agree with you. It's better to start narrow and go really into something and be absolutely there, hitting that nail on the head, than trying to please too many people. And it's interesting what you say about also the gold rush of blockchain and the gold rush of AI. It's almost laughable, isn't it? How it's like, oh well, we must do something with blockchain, and now we must do something with AI.
Right.
I mean, you see other things going on with your advisory roles, and I mean, what's your sense about how much AI is going to change both the healthcare space, but also the wider marketing or even societal space? What's your take on those things?
I mean, I think AI is ultimately what we choose to make it. So if we choose good applications, then it's going to be societally positive for healthcare, for workplace productivity, for lowering cost of goods and services. Like all of that's certainly possible. I think where it gets nefarious is when you start looking to replace all the humans, and removing work for millions of people, by replacing them. And this is certainly, I live in LA. I mean, certainly there's been a big backlash in entertainment for using AI in the writer's room, using AI to write like certain people, using AI for people's likenesses. And audiences don't much like that either, right? So there's been this kind of rebellion towards things which are more traditional and feel more real. So the sphere of it you apply it is going to matter a lot. I think it's up to us. And I think the other thing I will say is that everyone in this space seems to be an imposter. No one seems to have the monopoly on saying they know exactly how this is going to play out. Not Elon Musk, not Google. It's entirely, it's so democratized. It's in our hands to create something that's positive and useful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good positive look on it. The fact that there's a lot of intent there, and I mean, we're talking, other companies over here in the UK and in Europe, and I know a European company that's doing an awful lot around platforms for AI for diagnostics and things like that. And
Sure.
I agree. I think that there's some really great use cases. There's some really good beneficial things where we're saying this can do this more efficiently, but it's alongside the humans. Because I don't think any of us want to go 100%, AI doctor, just in case we fall outside of the norms of an algorithm or what it was learned on, what it was taught.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely, it's hard to get the training data. There was a lot of talk of digital twins when I was at GE and even when I was at Amazon, and it just makes my eyes roll into the back of my head, because it's really difficult. I mean, even at GE, I think we had instruments on every engine component and had the CAD on every engine and the metallurgic details and whatever. And it was still an engine that blew up in flight. If you can't predict that, and you've got all of these parameters, the idea that you're going to be able to predict how a human does to a precise degree when cellular physiology is so complicated with today's technology, it's kind of a fool's errand. But there are some really interesting uses. I still think vocal biomarkers, actually predicting health status from voice characteristics, is really interesting. I think you can use it in, there've been some applications in respiratory disease. I think that there'll come a point where there's a limit of resolution on discrimination between one type of respiratory ailment or another. But if you use it in a given application that's narrow enough, you could probably do pretty well in predicting whether someone's going to be readmitted into hospital with heart failure, COPD, etc. Right? I think that there's good uses there. Some insurers, I think in Israel, tried doing this with call centers and had like good results. And so there's some interesting applications that I see, there, which are like still like kind of the undiscovered country. I think there's a lot of like really interesting uses of like net new biomarkers. Like the entire health industry is obsessed with like capturing blood pressure using non-invasive devices. It's like, well, there could be other metrics that we could measure using these sensors, which are not rooted in the 18th century, should someone care to do the work. But that's a lot of work. So like, and you mentioned like drug discovery and like all of these like complicated problems. The question is going to be like the fundamental limit of training data. And that's going to be interesting. But I will say that there's been like a lot of interesting advances in protein folding, which helps people understand like how a drug conforms into a receptor, which helps them predict response, and then kind of speeds up a lot of that like pre-clinical discovery work. We'll see.
Yeah. You kind of touched on it, but what about data in terms of the importance of data and privacy? And I mean, it must be a thing for Claimable, because you're getting people to submit their private health information. What's your take on the data part of the AI jigsaw?
I'll steal from Amazon shamelessly and say security is job zero. So you want to make sure that like your infrastructure is secure. You want to make sure you're complying with rules like HIPAA, and making sure that all of your communications are compliant. The other thing you want to make sure is that you're asking people for the minimum amount of data that is required to do the job. So, and in this case, the job is actually getting them access to healthcare. So there's always risk to acquiring data from people, because then you have to store it and manage it, protect it. So I think that's interesting. The other thing is that you want to make sure that you're using AI models that are compliant with patient privacy laws as well. So they're not just going to randomly spit out someone's patient data into someone else's case. And so we've been very careful to make sure that is not a possibility. And some of that's architectural, some of that's experience, and some of that's just like basic security operations. So and that would be a risk of just using Chat GPT or Claude or whatever in the wild, is that you're going to have all of those risks. They make you no promises.
Yeah. And I think it's something that everybody, you don't need to be in healthcare to pay due respect to people's data privacy and how you treat that. So just talking a bit specific on the marketing, and obviously you guys are leading the way in terms of using AI and technology in this healthcare space. Do you use it for your own digital marketing and for your own marketing?
I mean,
to it?
We're so early in this. We're so early in this space that it's like it's interesting to understand. There are a lot of really interesting companies that are popping up in the digital marketing stack. The problem that we have, I would say, is that there's so few HIPAA compliant solutions that are patient privacy protective, where you can understand where someone falls off in your funnel. So then you've kind of got your hands tied behind your back a little bit. So you kind of have to implement some of your own solutions. Because some of it's weird. It's kind of like I think of this as like weddings, but like if you book a venue for a party, it costs one price, but if you book a venue for a wedding, it's 5 times more, even though it's the same exact venue on the same exact day. There's a lot of this with like HIPAA eligibility for marketing solutions and tracking solutions. They become so prohibitively expensive that you effectively have to build your own. But that's a space where people like really need help, because you want to understand, like, for example, like, okay, in the funnel, where are patients like not really understanding this? And then the other part is like, how do you track patients? And is that really ethical? The answer is like, for the most part, no. So we and also it's just very expensive. We did a lot of research on keywords, and we found that it was just very expensive to actually target patients via keywords, because then you're bidding against the insurance company.
Yeah.
What we've ended up realizing is like it's old fashioned. Like there's a lot of communities in Reddit where patients are like really struggling with denials. There's Facebook as well. There are a lot of patient support communities. There's actually a Cigna survivors group or something. I've like joined a lot of these groups to understand what the conversation is. And so I think a lot of that's going to be good old fashioned word of mouth. And then the other thing is that we've realized is that the doctors need for patients to get care in order to stay in business, because the way the model works is that payment is on approval of the claim. So in order for them to stay alive, they need those claims to get paid. But it's now 60%. I think the burden of prior authorization, which is a term we have in this country, it's like 60% more than it was like some years ago. The timeline to getting paid is like spun out, and the amount they're getting paid has gone down. So it's like a perfect storm of like terrible market forces. So that's actually been kind of analog. Like it's really interesting. I actually went to Twitter to find our first users, and I found this practice in the Midwest who were like taking a flamethrower to like one of the insurers on Twitter. I was like, one, this is hilarious. And two, this is all very true. So I reached out. They then welcomed me into a community. And then that community has specific channels, and it's all like message boards, et cetera, et cetera. And it's great. That's growing organically, and more providers are like coming to us and saying they need help.
I think that you describe a challenge that we're familiar with, in that people have too long sort of thought about digital marketing in too siloed a way, and forgotten about the human behavioral aspects. And actually what's going on is that you need to think about discovery. So you're talking about going to groups like Reddit or groups on Facebook. It's about marketing in a way that's discovery, and actually what are you doing in order to be able to be discovered. And then also you're talking about another thing that I'm familiar with, which is the marketing via the gatekeepers. So in this case the clinicians, the doctors, by making the clinicians aware, it means that they're able to basically then provide advice or signpost people, and so you can get people that way. So that's really good.
There's some phenomenal predicates for this. The way I look at it is like GoodRx, who are a company that you may or may not be aware of in England, but they're effectively a coupon card for cheap cash pay medicines, and they're everywhere. Right. So you can go to goodrx.com and you can look up a drug, and it will give you a price at pharmacies near you, and it gives you a QR code that you take to the pharmacy, they scan it, you get the drug. 10 years ago plus, they were figuring out how to aggregate a lot of low level needs, which might have been, cheap Viagra. It might be like, now it'd be like cash pay Ozempic, or it might be cash pay inhalers or whatever, right? Like people are trying to figure out how to get this. It's now become GoodRx inhaler, GoodRx Ozempic, GoodRx. So they've become like this high level aggregator of terms. But initially they had to like be very high up in the awareness funnel for patients. And then eventually they figured out how to capitalize on that exact moment where someone has the problem, and knowing how to serve them in that moment with, either an ad or something relevant. But a lot of what they did was they had the doctor hand a card to the patient because it felt like they were being given a prescription.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and it's nicely bringing it back to that classic marketing thing of right message, right person, right time. It's doesn't, the tools that have changed, but the simple principles of what wins are still the same. I mean, it's been really, really, really interesting talking to you. And it'd just be good to understand like where you think things are going next in terms of industry trend, as like as a wrap up.
Oh, for healthcare? Or for healthcare, I think a lot depends. I think a lot depends on what happens next week, or / when this happens. So
the election in the US.
the election, the thing we may not talk about. But I
Yeah.
think a lot depends on that. I think if there's
Yeah.
an erosion of patient rights and more deregulation of the insurance industry, this problem gets worse.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think the patient's going to drag these people out of their offices with pitchforks. Like
Yeah.
it will end up happening that systems which are inefficient in a free market eventually
Yeah.
get voted against. So, like, I think that will happen. Just the arc depends on that. I think if the Democrats stay in office, then you might see an expansion of patient protections. I think some of the policies may end up being very corporate friendly, which may or may not be helpful. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I think there'll be more capacity for us to work directly with the administration to like really start like shaping helpful policy toward protecting patients. TBD.
Yeah. Well, it could well be then a positive outcome. I mean, people listening to this, I'm sure there's people there which want to reach out to you personally, Warris, but also to Claimable. How would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so getclaimable.com, and right now we're helping patients with rheumatoid, denials, ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, and migraine. In total, that covers about 70 million Americans. We're adding new conditions on a regular basis. We're soon, I think, looking to support MS and then maybe some subtypes of cancer as we explore. But me personally, like, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm not hard to find, and I tend to be quite responsive.
Okay, that's great. You've got a fairly distinctive name there, but we'll make sure that we put your handles in the description and the show notes on all the different platforms.
Pleasure.
So yeah, I mean, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you. Really, very, very interesting. So thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule for doing that.
Thanks for fitting me in. Appreciate it very much.
That's really good. And to those of you watching and listening, depending on your platform of choice, thank you very much for spending your time being a listener or a watcher of Digital Marketing Answered. Hopefully you found it really useful. Please do reach out to Warris if you've got questions for him, but also leave questions for us, and do leave ratings and reviews. It helps others discover this content. So thank you very much, and until next time, have a good time marketing.